expectancy of completeness in people. He says that the Hebrew prophets in the Old Testament had a word for this. This word referred to an expectation or the one day of human completeness. And it was the word shalom. It's the word shalom. And he says it specifically means the webbing together of God, humans, and all creation in justice, fulfillment, and delight. In a world where shalom prevails, all marriages would be healthy and all children would be safe. Those who have too much would give to those who have too little. And we could say in Gaza. Their parents would build homes for one another. In offices and corporate boardrooms, executives would secretly scheme to help their colleagues succeed. Wow. They would compliment them behind their backs. Tabloids would be filled with the accounts of courage and moral beauty. Talk shows would feature mothers and daughters who love each other deeply. Talk shows would feature wives who give birth to their husbands' children. Disagreements would be settled with grace and civility. Doors would have no locks. Cars would have no alarms. In this world, this ideal of completeness in those around us. Completeness in mankind. Schools would no longer need police presence or even hall monitors. Students and teachers and janitors would honor and value one another's work. At recess, every kid would get picked for a team. Churches would never split, he says. In this ideal of shalom or completeness in the person's attitude, behavior, people would be neither bored nor hurried. No father would ever again say, "I'm too busy," to a disappointed child. Divorce courts and battered women's shelters would be turned into community recreation centers. Every time one human being touched another, it would be to express encouragement, affection, and delight. No one would be lonely or afraid. People of different races would join hands. They would honor and be enriched by their differences and be united in their common humanity. And in the center of the entire community would be its magnificent architect and most glorious resident, the God whose presence fills each person with unceasing splendor and ever-increasing delight. And this is what we expect. It's the innate inner awareness of what should be of the people that we encounter and interact with. We innately know it. We do. We know how people should behave. Generally speaking, we know it. We know. That's ugly. Why are you cutting me off? Who do you think you are? Why do you always have to put your... we react to it constantly. The problem is, in this sinful world, in this world that is broken by sin, normal doesn't exist. Complete human packages don't exist before Christ or since Christ. Other than Him, it doesn't exist. And so we withdraw from community. Community has come to mean neighborhoods that share parks, or a school, or even a church, where you come and sit and share a pastor or a band that leads us in worship songs, or maybe the church building or facility. That's what community means, and it's not what God had intended. Those things are a start. God is intended for each of us. God is intended for you and me meaningful community. And our tendency is self-preservation because we've been there, we've been hurt. We understand what can happen. We know the risk. Look what Isaiah 53 says. Isaiah 53 in the Old Testament says, "We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way." In Romans 3:23, we have the New Testament version where the Apostle Paul is talking more extensively about this idea of everyone being broken by sin. He spends much of Romans 3 describing this. He says in verse 23, for everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. We want and require pain-free relationships from people. If we're honest, this is what we want and what we often require. In the world, in its broken state, it doesn't exist. And so a lot of us never experience, we never trust community enough or persevere enough to get through and see through a lot of the risk, a lot of the pain, inherent pain. In the New Testament, we have an example of the Apostle Paul. It's one of the rare places, and in fact, it's the only one that I'm aware of, where we see a little bit of the ugly, broken nature of Paul, even though redeemed by Christ, filled with Christ's love and becoming more and more like Christ, as Paul was. The great Apostle Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament scriptures. There's a point here where we see, and a lot of Bible scholars agree, that this was a reaction by Paul because of having been burned by someone in the past. Paul and Barnabas had been ministry partners. They had been doing ministry for quite some time. They built a trust and a friendship over the months and years. They've seen God use them remarkably together. And they break apart. They go their separate ways because of a disagreement that they have. And we have a little bit of this context in Acts 15. It all has to do with another apostle, John Mark, who Barnabas wanted to bring along with them in their ministry. Here's the example. In Acts 15:36, after some time, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let's go back and visit each city where we previously preached the word of the Lord to see how the new believers are doing." Barnabas agreed and wanted to take along John Mark. But Paul disagreed strongly, since John Mark had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in their work. Their disagreement was so sharp that they separated. Barnabas took John Mark with him and sailed for Cyprus. Paul chose Silas. It's amazing. I mean, the Bible characters and figures and personalities of the Old Testament didn't get it right. The Bible characters filled with God's Spirit in the New Testament didn't always get it right. And neither do we. Neither do you. Neither do I. And my hope this morning is not to give credence for keeping your distance in community, but for understanding why we press on into it. Remember, a personal relationship with God, between you and God, is very important to God, but He never, never imagined it being private. The New Testament scriptures don't describe a personal relationship with God that's private, you and God. It's just not existent in the Bible. The church contexts that we read in the scriptures are a community of believers growing in their relationship with God together by one another's help and encouragement, by seeing what God is doing in him and her and being built up and encouraged because of God's work in the people around you. Not just in your own personal time with God. You try to have a relationship with God on your own. I've tried it before. It is nearly impossible. We weren't made for it. It's not part of the architect's design or blueprint for us. The people in the Bible didn't get it right, and we don't get it right. Our ideals of what best friends should look like, or even just friendships should be, our ideals of what they should look like will always disappoint us. Here's really the big point of the morning. Community, as we're calling it, or I really like to refer to it more as, in the context of this series, as our common unity. Our common unity is the context on earth. It's the place on planet Earth where we find and experience God. I believe it with all my heart. Community, or the common unity that Christ is to believers, is the place on planet Earth where we find and experience God. A lot of us have been taught that you just read the Bible, or you just come and sit in church, and then you leave and go about your